All right, hey crew, welcome to part 0, as I'm calling it. We're going to talk really quickly about signal flow and how the essentially how the audio gets to the SQ7, how Livestream Audio actually receives and sends audio. So this is the full signal chain here. So welcome to my beautiful illustration in the Freeform app here on the Mac. So we'll start with, so most of you understand at least the first part, I think. So real quick, you got your microphone or your source on stage, guitar, mic, whatever. That is plugged in via an XLR cable to the stage box, which is in the mix rack in the amp room, right? That's the big box with all the XLR cables at the bottom of the rack. You can think of that and Avantis as one, because at front of house, all of the audio processing is happening in the actual Avantis console in the booth. The stage box in the rack is just an extension. It only receives the inputs themselves. It sends it straight to Avantis. So it's kind of one system, if that makes sense. Those of you who remember the iLive in our old system, is actually the other way around. The brain was in the rack, and the board in the booth was just a controller. So Avantis is the opposite of that. Avantis board in the booth is the brain of everything. So audio comes in off the mic source. Essentially, it hits Avantis. It hits the Avantis preamp or the gain staging. Now, this is why front of house's role in this area is so important. I can't zoom anymore. Yes, I can. It's really important that front of house sets good gain staging for everything. And by that, I mean you've got a healthy signal coming in from all of your sources that's not clipping. So, I don't have the meters in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly what number that would be. But, full of green, a little bit into the yellow, right? Shouldn't be red. So front of house people, which is all of us, you want to make sure your gain staging is good, and you'll see why in a second. So it's not just for you. So then what happens? Oh, I left a text box. Avantis's audio, it hits the preamp in Avantis, the gain, whatever you want to call it, preamp, which is what it technically is. It hits the preamp. From there, the audio gets sent out into Dante. The audio send from Avantis is post preamp, which means it hits the preamp, and then from there it gets sent out into Dante before it hits any of Avantis's other processing. So the Avantis high pass, low pass, the gate, the parametric EQ, compressor, all of that has no effect on what's sent to Dante. And I'll explain what exactly is going on with Dante in a second. But the important thing to know for front of house is that your processing does not affect SQ5 at monitors and SQ7 at Livestream, except for your gain staging. So it's really important that preamp is set correctly and healthily. Now, what is Dante? Good question. Dante is a fascinating technology. It is, it's almost, I think of it almost like this nebulous, like sound cloud thing. And it's because there's actually no real central hub for Dante. Now, there is in terms of some of the technical things. The Avantis is actually controlling everything. It's the master clock in a sense. That's pretty irrelevant for actual mixing. But the cool thing about Dante is that you can have a transmitter. So like think about walkie-talkies, right? You get a transmitter and a receiver device. Avantis are going to be our primary transmitter for the most part. And then other Dante devices, other soundboards and computers can be receivers from Avantis. So I can send audio from Avantis to the SQ5, to the SQ7, to other computers that are doing recording, et cetera, and they can all receive different audio from Avantis in different orders. It's a virtual patch bay. Like if you think of I don't know, you've ever seen those old phone control rooms, whatever they're called, phone call centers, I don't know, where they would plug the cable in to one spot and then plug it into a next to connect someone's call to someone else. It's a little bit what's happening with Dante. You're saying, hey, take kick from Avantis output channel 1 and send that to SQ7 input channel 1. And it's like, okay, it makes that link digitally and you get that audio sent that way. So it is a little tough to explain, but hopefully that makes sense. So you're sending audio from Avantis's preamp into the Dante network, and then in Dante, we can send that audio, that post preamp audio from Avantis, to all of our boards simultaneously, and then they can all process it separately. So what Monitors is doing, the gain staging at Monitors and the EQ at Monitors, has zero effect on live stream. They don't even know that each other exist in that sense. So that's kind of Dante. So hopefully that helps. If you need more explanation, I can try in person later. So you've got your audio in Dante, right? From there, ignore this. From there, we hit the SQ7. So your channels are coming in there. And so the important thing with SQ7, especially as you sit down to mix, is to make sure that you do have healthy gain staging on all your channels. Your ideal, and this isn't going to be possible everywhere, it should be possible with vocals, guitars, and in some ways with drums. Your ideal world is to have your gain on SQ7 at 0 on all of your channels if you can. And that's only going to be possible if Avantis gain is set correctly. Now, like I said, this is not possible with all channels. For example, with the sermon mics, with John and Greg's mics, and even with some of the wirelesses, we have to have the gain fairly low at front of house for feedback reasons. Most of you know this. And so we can't pump a ton of signal out into Dante with those mics, and so we end up boosting the gain at SQ7 and SQ5 to compensate. So that's one scenario where this isn't true. But the reason I say it is because if your Avantis gain staging at front of house is good, you'll have a healthy signal there. You won't have a ton of noise. You'll have a really clean signal coming in to broadcast and to SQ5. And so that's just the reason for the importance at Avantis. And so start at 0 when you're setting your gains on your channels, and then boost as necessary to, again, get that healthy gain stage that works for you. It's important to have that gain correctly because then you're not overly pushing faders. You're not trying to compensate down the line for something that you should have set correctly at gain, right? So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to take a quick drink here, so stand by. Okay, so we're at SQ7. This is where it gets a little hairy. Now, practically, this doesn't affect mixing too much. So, we've got if you picture with me, we've got the audio PC over to the left side. You got that monitor floating there, right? And you've got channels being processed over there. What's happening is we are, it's called an insert. So we're taking the audio from a couple of channels on the SQ7. So they hit via Dante, right? I'm gesturing with my hands. You can't see my hands. We hit via Dante. We hit SQ7 channels. And then some of them, right off the top, get pulled out of SQ7 and sent to the audio PC for processing in Audition, right? Or at least it's Audition right now. Down the road, who knows, it might change. And so that specifically is the vocal channels, John and Greg's channels, and your master output. So trust me, the routing under the hood is a rat's nest. It's nuts. But it works. So suffice to say that your audio from those channels leaves the SQ7 before it's processed by your EQ and gate on SQ7. So you get processed in Audio PC and then sent back to SQ7. One nuance to that, that's true for everything except the master out. So you've got your inserts, your sends and returns happening on vocals and John and Greg, right? Those then return to SQ7 and are processed in the main mix with everything else. Then when SQ7 goes to its master output, when everything's kind of compiled and mixed down into the master fader on the right side, that master fader also has an insert on it, and it returns to Audio PC again. We do some mastering on it, which I'll show you when we get into Logic here. We do some mastering on it in Audio PC. It comes back again to SQ7, and then that final output, that final mastered mix, goes to the XLR outputs on the back, just 2 cables on the back of the SQ7. Those go up into the ceiling, and they actually come down right where I'm sitting right now in live stream, and they plug into the back of the video switcher. And then super simple from there, the switcher outputs to Resi, to our streaming encoder in here, over an SDI cable, over just a coax cable essentially. And then Resi sends that to the web, and they do their thing on their end. So if I can zoom out here, let me see. So that's the whole signal flow. I realize that especially right here, it's rather complicated. But the most important thing to know is as you're interacting with front of house and Avantis. So if you're on front of house and you make a gain change, you're going to want to let monitors and SQ7 know, and broadcast, let monitors and broadcast know so they can compensate if necessary and either increase or decrease gain accordingly. It's really important that we have those lines of communication so that everyone knows what's going on and we've got things balanced, especially when it comes to musician ears. We want to, if we're going to jack up a preamp at Avantis, we're going to want to turn it down at SQ5 to make sure we don't overdrive. So that is the system signal flow. That took longer than I thought. I talk a lot. Hopefully that makes sense. Thanks for watching.